Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talking Chickens with Mike and Matt, M&M Exhibition Poultry. Today, this is Talking Chickens number 54. That's hard to believe. We're with our good friend Nate Rynish, and today's kind of a little different. We're going to be talking exhibition geese and probably get to other waterfowl we're doing. It's all according to where Nate wants to go with it. And we just hope you enjoy, pick up some tips. Anybody that keeps waterfowl in this weather, good for you. Not good for me. Good for you. So I don't really have a whole lot to say for the start of this. Matt, you got anything?
I think we covered on the last one. I think everything's good.
All right. All right. Well, with that, welcome Nate Rynish, ABA, APA, General License Judge. Big wheel in the waterfowl world.
Well, I try to be.
Well, yeah, you tried to
Human.
be. So I'm kind of like Mongo, little cog in the great big wheel. So,
But he got them little
all
tiny
right.
wheels on his trailer.
Yeah, we little wheels. My dad used to say, "Do you know how? Do you think that some bitch knows how fast the tires are actually going? The 13-inch tires, they're going 70 mile an hour. No wonder they burn up the bearings every single time he ever saw one. That's all he talked about. So, a little different here today. You can see the background's different, and there's a thingy up there. I'm actually in the apartment of Eagle Nest Hatchery, and I forgot my computer. In fact, I forgot my sweatshirt, so I've been in a real good one here for the past couple of days, but we're getting by. So, got John the little notebook book, whatever the hell you call them pads. It's not an iPad, but anyway. So it's a Google pad. So, Nate, take it away. Tell us where you want to start, and we'll just roll from there, man.
Okay. Well, like you said, I want to talk a bit about geese today. And, I know you guys always usually ask people where they start, how they start, and stuff like that. And I was on here once a while back, probably almost a year ago now, actually. I think one of your first
Yeah,
episodes you
one
did
first.
on hatching. Um,
Yep.
so I don't really plan to talk much about the hatching stuff. I would say if anybody wants to talk about that, really, you should go back to, I think it was like I want to say maybe your third or fourth episode or something like that we
Yeah, I
did
think
that.
so.
And I think there's a lot of good information on there. But in general, I wanted to chat a bit about geese. And, there was once a point in my life when I was younger and I started doing the whole bird thing as a kid. And I said that I would never ever own waterfowl because they were messy and they you know how they are. And now if you ask me if I could keep one species of bird around, I would definitely keep the geese and get rid of everything else if I could only choose one thing. Um, they've really grown on me a lot. I thoroughly enjoy them. They're a different type of bird, and that's kind of rolls into the first thing here is everybody always asks, why geese? And I think there's a handful of good reasons for them. Like I said, they're a little bit different, right? They're not like your chickens. They're not like your ducks. They're a lot more intelligent than that, as far as I'm concerned. A lot of people think instantaneously about mean geese, and that's always what I hear when people talk about geese. The first thing, oh, back when I was a kid, Grandma and Grandpa had a goose, and it chased me around the yard. A lot of us have that kind of a story, but in reality, like for the number of geese that I have and own, and for the number of geese I've been around, most of them are not like that. Maybe at certain times of the year, of course, because they are more of a seasonal bird. But I mean, they can be good guard dogs. They're very attentive. They watch everything. When even airplanes fly above my place here, you
Yeah.
can watch every single goose, and they tilt their head like this, and they're looking up in the air. They notice everything that goes on. So they're very smart, and they can actually be very personable. For the number of people that have a bad story about a goose, there's a lot that have a great story about a goose. Um, they are, if you get them as babies, that's what I tell a lot of people. If you really want to have that kind of an experience with a goose, best thing is to get them as a baby, because they are very, I guess what's the word, they imprint more easily. I used to have a goose that used to follow me around the yard all the time because he happened to be the only one that hatched in a particular batch. And so he was the only one. He saw me all the time, only me, and they correlate that with you as their mother. You take care of them all the time, and next thing you know, you got some geese that are really friendly and follow you around the yard. That can be good, maybe bad in some cases.
I always found they really like the person that feeds them.
Oh yeah.
I always fed them, nobody else did. And when I
Yeah.
went in the yard, they didn't get too fussy. But if somebody else
Mhm.
went in there, they was on them. And so I think they
Yes.
get bonded to the person that feeds them as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, and that's like a lot of people when they like to pair the geese up because they also bond with each other. A lot of them will do that, which again, that can be a good thing for you in the breeding season. It can also be sometimes a bad thing in the breeding season if you want them to be with different birds. They won't pay attention to the other birds. They only pay attention to their one mate. And that's why, like I tell people, they're smart. And when I talk about ducks, I mean, I love ducks, I love chickens, but compared to geese, they're stupid. They're dumb, and they just to me are that much smarter. They're paying attention. Like I said, they're more personable. But anyway, the other big thing that I really like about them, and you see them very predominantly up here in the northern areas in the Midwest, you see waterfowl in general. They're very hardy up here. This climate is probably better for them. Even up here, we had, a couple weeks ago, we had 40 below wind chills, and it was negative 22 degrees in the truck 2 Saturdays ago when I got in there. And the geese will still go outside. Not all of them want to go outside when it gets that bitter cold, but when you're talking below freezing and it's 0 degrees, it's 10 degrees, those birds still want to go outside. They don't always want to sit inside. They'd rather be outside than inside anytime. They're very cold hardy, and realistically, they don't need a lot to get by. They're kind of self-sufficient too. That's something I always tell people. People think big goose, big bird, that means high feed bill. And it can. In the wintertime, they definitely eat more. But if you're set up certain ways, like the way I am, I have big pastures, and the geese will spend a lot of time out on that pasture grazing and just finding vegetation, bugs, things like that to eat. So like I notice my feed bill goes down, and I don't give them a free feeder. I don't just sit and feed them all the time throughout those summertime months or the spring months. The grass is it's very good for them as well. So it's kind of important to think about it that way. How your feed bill can be impacted. That's why I always try to make sure I'm down on my numbers before going into winter, because it's all I need to breed from anyways. And the other thing is the feed bill. It's not really as bad. I'd say it's about the same throughout the time that I am breeding and hatching and whatnot, because I'm putting more feed into the babies, and the adults are out on pasture most of the time. They can live a long life. Longevity wise, I've had geese live to be 20 years old. So they can live a long time. They don't usually have a tendency to get as sick as, like, I would say the chickens do. Chickens seem to have a higher risk of getting sick and ill. Whereas with the geese, I generally find you usually have a lively and healthy goose, or you have a dead one. I don't find a lot of it to be in between. Usually by the time you find out there's something wrong, it seems like they're about to be gone. And even though they don't lay as many eggs as the ducks do, they can be productive for a long period of time. They can be reproductive for years. And even though I don't let all of mine sit on eggs, there are definitely some breeds that are better for it. They will do a good job, but it all goes back to same thing with any animals. You need to have the proper setup. You need to be managing it the right way, even if you want them to sit on their own nests and hatch their own babies. Can't just expect that they're going to go out there and do it, and in a couple months they're going to come back with.
I think that's a big point that a lot of people don't take into consideration when they get them. Is you got to have the facilities for geese, and like you said, when I had them, they were out in the pasture, and they were out there pretty much all the time. In the winter, I'd give them a spot to get in, but they were, like you said, they rarely would take advantage of that. It had to get really bad. The palms, they'd walk out in that stuff. It snowed so much one year they went over a 5-foot fence because they just walked right over the fence because they could get out. And once they know where they can get out, they pretty much go right back to that spot. So but you got to have the facilities for them. I don't know that you necessarily need to have like water and all that, but you got to have enough room for them to get out and move. They can't be. They're not a breed or a species that takes well to being cooped up like we do with the chickens and the ducks sometimes.
Usually, if you coop them up, in my experience, my opinion, you're going to lead to probably worse conditioned birds than would be if you had them outside. They love to be outside, and like you said, I mean, people ask me what kind of facilities do I need for a goose, even in the wintertime. A calf hutch, something for them to get out of the wind. Really is what they need to get out of the elements. Is what they need. Now, if you're talking Chinese and Africans, and you're raising them in sub freezing climate, you might want to try to do a little more with that because of the potential of frostbite on their knobs. But for the most part, that's all you really need is something for them to be able to get out of the elements. And as for, like you said, water, you don't need a pond. People ask me that all the time. Do I need a pond for the geese? And the answer is no. Kiddie pools, honestly, I love to use those. I do have ponds. I dug ponds last year, and I started to make that part of my setup for numerous reasons. But what I love to use, and especially in the wintertime, you go get those concrete mixing tubs, and that's a decent size. Personally, I hate kiddie pools. A lot of people love kiddie pools. I hate them because they just break. I know they're cheap, but they're break. The concrete mixing tubs, if you get the ribbed ones last a long time. Those smooth ones, they have a higher tendency to crack and break. And I'm talking about like the 3-foot long ones. I much prefer those over the small ones. I use the small ones for feed tubs, but I usually will use those bigger ones for the water. But like I said, the ribbed ones. I don't like the smooth ones. The smooth ones will break.
I always had luck because when it gets, like you said, that real bad stuff, I couldn't use those. I couldn't use the pools, but I had those 5-gallon electric horse waterers, and I would put one of them aside, and it kept the water from freezing, so they could always get their head in there to get something to drink when it got real nasty. Because you don't want them to clear out of water, and
right.
If you don't have that, then you're out there several times a day giving them some clean water to at least get drinking and get to eating with. But that always worked good for me, and I would dump it out every day and fill it back up. But they survived out there in some god awful weather with that.
Well, and what I think a lot of people don't realize either is, like, in the wintertime, they don't need a pool to swim in the wintertime necessarily. I mean, if you can provide it and you let them, that's great. But what's important is to give them something that they can use to submerge their heads. If they submerge their head, they can flush out their nostrils, they can flush out their system, and they can wash their eyes and flush out everything in their eyeballs. And you know how birds preen. So then they'll go ahead and they'll continue to preen themselves from that point. So like when I was, now I have a big dairy barn, and I do all the chores inside it's an old dairy barn that I converted into stuff for basically waterfowl and rabbits. And so it's nice doing chores in there in the wintertime versus when I still lived at my parents', everything was outside. So I used the rubber buckets and like the rubber feeding.
Vortex. Yeah, the vortex pans and buckets.
Yeah, because since they were made out of rubber and they would freeze outside, I would just smash them on the ground, and you didn't have to worry about it breaking, and you could replenish it as often as you needed to, and they would go over there and they would get their heads in. And the only thing I've ever heard bad about that, I've not had this problem, Some people said like with ducks, they've had the ducks jump in head first and then they get stuck and then they drown. So with the geese, I've never had that issue. The geese are usually big enough, they're not going to, and probably not able to jump in head first. But that's
It might not be dumb enough. It might not be dumb enough. I mean, if you had a flock of khaki camels, that might be a good way to eliminate them. Because I've never been around a duck as dumb as a khaki. I like camels, but they are, to me, that's the dumbest breed of. Well, there's two breeds of chickens, but that's the dumbest breed of waterfowl.
I raised khaki camels, right?
I know you do, but that's we don't sugarcoat shit. That's just my feeling. I've never and I've raised all the light ducks and most of the heavy ducks.
You're not wrong though. I'll give you that. And those guys, the males, the khaki camel males, are some of the most what's the word? They're very determined in the breeding season. I have watched the khaki camel male climb a fence to get over the fence to a female before, and let's put it this way: they are very vigorous. I don't have any issues with fertility.
Fertility issues, that's for sure.
But they are. I mean, they're not for the faint of heart either, because they are kind of wild. They can be. At least mine. I know I've had people that say, "Oh, mine are great. Mine are so calm." And
no, that's a lie.
At least anybody that I know that's had the exhibition ones are more. To me, they're not usually that tame. Now, I hatch a lot, and it's hard for me to tame down that many birds. I know some people spend a lot of time with those babies. Good for them. Good for the people that have that ability. With the number of birds that I hatch and how I raise them in the big open areas, I haven't done that. So mine are usually a little more lively. And I mean, I've raised most of the breeds of ducks as well. And just in terms of temperament, like if you compare khaki Campbell to a runner, pretty similar. Khaki Campbell to a Welsh Harlequin. The Welsh Harlequins are like the most docile, calmest birds when it comes to the light ducks. I don't know why it's such a difference. Khaki Campbells are in the Welsh Harlequin background, but yet that's just the way it is. So,
right.
But I still like them. They're still a favorite of mine, but there are some days that they get on my nerves.
Well, I like them if somebody else has them. I really like them then.
Yeah.
They're not for my
team. And that.
You have one caution since you brought it up about China. So back in my China days, I got in the habit. We had horse stalls. I had 3 12x14 horse stalls. I would bring them in the winter when it got well below zero, because of a buddy of mine up north, and I won't mention my name because he's gone, but he had like wire enclosures with roofs on them. And one year it got into the -20s around here, and his whole flock of Chinas, they were China sickles. They just absolutely froze to death. And everything else was fine. I mean, he had palms and Emdens and everything else, but the Chinas, I don't have enough body weight when it gets that bitter cold, that they're as tough as some of the other stuff outside. So I always brought them in when it got really nasty. They didn't want to come in, but they, if I could round them up, I would bring them in just for that reason. Like you also said, knobs and feet will freeze on them a lot quicker probably than on the other geese. So.
Yeah. Well,
and a frozen knob can't be a good thing. A frozen knob is not a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my quote.
Correct, Mike. A frozen knob is not a good thing.
No, what about I just thought of this because I thought of Kim Monday. What about Egyptians? How do they do in the winter? I've never been blessed with those critters. They're small, so I always wonder.
Yeah, my Egyptians are fine. They haven't really had any issues. Granted, I also in the summertime I have them out in a corn crib pen, and in the fall and into late fall before it starts to freeze, they're out there. And now I've got them in the barn. And the biggest reason is because they're already starting to get antsy. So it's where they would be out there isn't the best for the wind coverage where I'm at. So I got them in the barn, especially if they start to nest. So that's kind of why I do it that way. But they haven't had any issues with keeping themselves throughout the winter. Actually, I've found that they keep themselves very well, because if I ever have shown a goose in the spring, it's an Egyptian, because they seem to keep like I said, their plumage, and they keep themselves very well. And the reason I use the quotations when I say goose is because for the people that are watching, an Egyptian isn't really a goose. An Egyptian is actually a type of shell duck. But yeah, they're recognized as a light goose.
They're an ornery shell duck.
Yeah.
They
Well,
are.
I always knew they were tough because they're right in the Nile River with the crocodiles, and they seem to do just fine.
They are. I mean, they're definitely not, like I said, for the faint of heart, because they can be a little ornery, and for the most part, mine are all right. And if you talk to different people that have had them, you hear stories about some geese that can be with the Egyptians, ducks that can be. For me right now, when they're starting to want to get towards nesting and towards that breeding, they are not all of them are doing very well hanging out with other geese or the ducks.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've been told by some other breeders that it's okay to keep a pair of Egyptians, say with like a big goose, like Emdens and Toulouse and some of those bigger ones. But like I had some Steinbachers in with the Egyptians, and they did really good for most of the winter until the Egyptians decided that they think they might want to start nesting, and then all of a sudden they're picking on the Steinbachers. So I mean, even a Steinbacher apparently isn't big enough for all of them. So something that I was just talking to somebody about that earlier today about the Egyptians, and trying to give them a little bit of heads up, be careful, be aware. And sometimes a lot of the Egyptians won't even lay until their second or third year. So you
Well, I
kind of
have
got
to tell my Egyptian goose story while we're doing this, because I don't know if you remember, but one time Bill Wolf had all kinds of waterfowl, and he had them out in a great big field, and he had them blocked off. And we would go down there several times a year, but I don't know why I was helping him either run them in at night. He ran them into a little coops every night, and then he had an Australian shepherd that would help him, and he would run them in, and then he'd lock them up, and he had a guy that let them back out in the morning, so they were cooped up at night. But he told me to reach in and get that egg out of that Egyptian cage. Yeah, I learned. I didn't know nothing about him. Never wanted to know nothing about him, and I was just trying to get done. And I reached in there, and it was like you reached into a bobcat's cage. She did not want me in there.
Yep. Yes.
So that's why I decided I would never have them.
Like I said, they're gorgeous if you do them right, and you have the right amount of red in them, and I love the slick look on them. They're gorgeous birds to have. But like I said, I highly do not recommend them for anybody that's a beginner. They're definitely on the bottom of the list for somebody starting with geese. I would not get them to start. Maybe in time after somebody sees them, like you said, you got to have the right. They are kind of even different to me than my other geese. How I have my setup, they are off on their own in their own little area by themselves, and they are paired off in their own individual pens. And that's how I do that.
Before you go on, so go in like the top 3 or 4 or 5, whatever. If you like waterfowl, you like geese, and you're looking to get started and learn, what's couple 3 of the breeds that are nothing's easy, but what's something that will really give somebody a good introduction? What breed?
My general go-to on that is if you can find pilgrims, probably pilgrims. And the biggest reason that I say that is because a lot of the medium geese do have a bad rap for generally being the meanest of the geese. It's the medium geese, but for my pilgrims, I've not had any issues really with temperament. Of course, if you grab any of the birds, people, you got to realize that if you go grab a goose, not all of them want to be pet. Not all of them want to be touched. Like I said, if you imprint on them and you do all that stuff, they probably are fine with it. but some of them are more, they like to bite more than others. So you do kind of have to expect that. I don't have the pilgrims attack me. Yeah, they might grab you when you pick them up. But for the most part, they're fairly docile and calm. They are probably some of the better mothers out of the goose breeds that are available. And the other big reason is because you can't. It's harder for a lot of people to tell the sex on most breeds of geese, and pilgrims
Yes.
are the only ones in our standard that are recognized in our standard that are able to be sexed by color, with the females being gray and the males being white. So
Auto
for
sexing.
people that don't know, that's probably a good way to go. There are other ways that you can tell males from females, and I actually have that on my tablet of stuff that I think would be good to discuss, so we can get to that in a little bit. After that, I do think the American buffs are up there. I haven't had issues really with them having too much of an attitude, and again, they're a medium-sized bird, and fairly, like I said, fairly docile. And I don't really have a lot of experience with raising the American buffs, but from my understanding, they are decent mothers, and so that's why I would kind of go towards that direction. I generally try to stay away from the heavy geese. Toulouse, everybody loves a Toulouse, but if you get a good Toulouse, it's harder for people that are just starting to breed them, it seems, and they just don't really have an understanding, I think, of what it takes to produce and breed and feed a really good Toulouse. So I kind of stay away from that. And even kind of the same with the Africans. The Africans might be towards the bottom of the list, and most of the heavy breeds. I would probably put the Emdens, say, in there at like 4, because they are a heavy breed, but they're larger, and that's kind of the reason why I don't recommend them as one of the number 1 breeds. Just because of that reason, in terms of handling them. Of course, it's a white bird, so people trying to figure out the males versus females. I don't think it's that hard on a heavier bird. You can kind of start to see the masculine traits versus the feminine traits. But from my experience with the Emdens, they're not as good of mothers, say, as those first ones. I would maybe say like number 3, I might put the Chinese in there. I would even go as far as putting my breed in there as like the tufted Romans, maybe having them in as number 3. I've had a lot of people get started with them in the last few years. And again, the Romans are not really a cuddly goose, right? They kind of like to be on their own. But when you grab them, mine do nibble. They respect me. They come up to my feet, but they do like to bite. And some of them bite hard just because they don't like being held. But they are a smaller bird, so they are easier to handle, and they can be decent mothers as well. I know some people that actually they let them raise their own young, and they do raise some of their own young, so they can be decent mothers. The reason I kind of put the Chinese in there, maybe 3, maybe even down towards 4 or 5, I would say those last couple are kind of variable. The reason I say them is because it's generally easier to tell masculine versus feminine, with the males having a larger knob. And a lot of Chinese are very personable. I have friends that have the Chinese, and Jim Konechny, friend of mine, he come down to Arkansas a few years ago. He's got this goose that he named Squeaky. Squeaky walks out the pen door and follows Jim all the way to the trailer and into his pen in the trailer. And Chris Hervé is another breeder of Chinese, and his birds are very personable with him. He spends a lot of time with them, of course, but they come up to him. And like I said, the attitudes, I hear a lot of people talk about attitude of Chinese, and I think that can be potential in the breeding season. I've had a couple of ganders come up and bite me in my rear while I was doing chores in the breeding season, but most of the rest of the year, I never have any problems with them. And they're a light breed. so easy to handle. And then the other thing, like I said, is the fact that it's generally easier to tell males from females with them. That is probably one of the biggest things that I find people have a problem with, is telling males from females in the geese without actually vent sexing the birds.
Right. Yep. I agree. Well, thanks. Good advice. I remember the Emdens. Emdens are one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Toulouse too. But the I think Bryson was maybe 8 or 9, and I got him a pair of Emdens. And to this day, this was the biggest male I had ever seen. To this day, and I can remember standing there, and he was as tall as Bryson.
Yeah.
I mean, he was absolutely a mammoth thing, and never did anything wrong. But I can imagine that if you're not a big person, they
Mm-hmm.
can be rather intimidating because those blue-eyed devils can almost look right straight at you. You think,
Yeah.
"Holy moly!" And they're heavy. I mean, you go to
Mm-hmm.
well, you go to pick up an end, and if you don't weigh, a lot of people don't weigh, you know, 2 to 3 times as much as an Emden. As my dad would say, the shit would be on. I mean,
Yeah.
they're very powerful, but
Yes.
they're kind of an elegant regal for just being a white goose especially the males with the neck. And they're beautiful goose. I've always liked them.
Well,
Before
and
you get
that's
to,
the
and I don't know why. Go ahead.
Yep. Well, I was just going to say with the Emdens, there's if you get a really good Emden, and my opinion of a lot of people that I have talked to, especially some of the older, let's say our old timers in this hobby that have dealt with Emdens, and they look at some of the Emdens now, they're not quite what they used to be in terms of skeletal structure. They lack a lot of that. But when you get an Emden that's really balanced, that's a wide, long-bodied bird that doesn't have a snaky neck, that actually has some depth, some thickness and girth to the neck
That
and
big,
that
thick,
skull.
that big. Yes. Yep.
Yes,
They're a picture.
that's
I mean, they really are.
It was
Mhm.
interesting. While we're on Emdens, when we were at the hatchery there, Dustin has a flock of show Emdens and a rather large flock of production Emdens. I've judged a lot of those birds that come out of that hatchery for fair market goose projects. They're totally different birds, size wise, structure wise. But those production Emdens are kind of a neat goose to me because they're a little more compact. But man, are they wide and, like you said, long, and they got a head like a tree trunk, and just a different type of goose compared to the exhibition ones that I'm normally used to. But that whole flock, if you looked at them, they all looked exactly alike. There was no variation in the birds, and
Yeah.
Yeah, their necks shorter, so it gives them even a stockier appearance. I mean, because they don't have that long, graceful, great big neck that a really good show Emden does. They have it's a thick neck, but I mean, it's like smaller, and they're laying machines. I mean, they are laying machines. But
Yep.
the difference when you see two flocks side by side of the commercial ones and the exhibition ones, you'll think, well, they kind of, well, they're white. They're white and they're long and they're broad, but the legs aren't as long, the neck's not as long because they don't offer that body capacity, and they
Yep.
dress really well. When for a market goose, they really dress well.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah, that is
that's
pretty cool.
that's actually something else that I had on here that I hadn't quite mentioned yet. When it comes to geese, one of my favorite things to eat is goose.
Yep, I like.
I get that all the time. Oh, you eat your yes, I do. I will gladly do it all the time.
Yeah.
I raise a lot of this stuff. Even my chickens, I'll process for myself. Breast some of it. I do a lot of it different. I do a couple of geese and ducks a year, whole birds, because we do like to eat whole birds. Breast a lot of them, especially the younger ones that they don't make the cut. And I'm not going to keep them to full maturity. and they really don't have enough on them to do that. But you have the breast meat. I will always keep the breast meat on those birds. I like to keep the gizzards and the hearts, and even I do keep the fat and utilize the fat on some of it.
Yep.
I know that's more of a popular thing in certain areas, and I think nowadays with everybody's kind of getting back on this homestead trend that talk about rendering fat. Duck fat is great, or goose fat is great for baking, cooking, whatever, in terms of that. And I really love the flavor. I used to duck
Me
and goose
too.
hunt
That's
a
what I was
lot.
going to say. That the flavor, it
Yeah,
flavors everything. Everything is so rich
yeah.
when you cook in that. It just has this rich, luxurious. Yeah, I agree. It's fantastic.
Well, and now a lot of the people that don't like it, usually they don't like it because of the fat content in it, which is where you can try other things. Like if you want to just do the breast, or like I will do in the late fall. Usually it's Thanksgiving weekend for me when I butcher a lot of my stuff. I will do skin on breasts. So instead of plucking the whole entire bird, I'll go ahead and I'll pluck all up and down the breast. And even you take that extra skin that kind of comes off down more than you would say if you're just breasting the bird, and you keep the skin on and you cook with the skin on, it keeps that fat layer on there. If you like to eat the skin, if you're that kind of a person, it's good. And then it helps kind of with that cooking process too, not to dry it out as much. And
Right.
that's what I really like. If I do when I just breast the birds, I slice a lot of that and you do like a fajita thing. Or I do make a lot of duck and goose jerky that I can eat at work and stuff. But that's one thing that I really love. I used to duck and goose hunt a lot. And when I did that, the Canadian geese that I would shoot, to me, that just tastes like garbage. And a lot of the other ducks I would shoot taste like garbage compared to a domestic bird that I started raising. And the amount of money I spent duck hunting and goose hunting on decoys, I was wondering why I was doing that anymore. So I just started eating all my own birds. But it's also, that's how I grew up. I really liked when you guys had Jeff Hallback on, and he talked about his upbringing with the hobby, and because he definitely saw a different side of that hobby than a lot of other people did. And sometimes I think that I'm kind of one of those people, because even though I didn't live on the dairy farm, my grandparents were less than a half a mile up the road. And so most of my early life, we were the farm hands, and we learned a lot of things on that farm. We never bought milk from the store. We always got milk out of the bulk tank. I learned how to process animals and how to butcher animals from, lambs, hogs, and even cattle. When we had a down cow, we had to do it ourselves. We couldn't take it away. And I try to carry a lot of that into what I do now, because I don't do the hobby for money. I don't sell a ton of birds, and not because I don't want to, but I try to align with people that have the same ideals that I do. And so I want them to go to some of the right places. And I also don't like giving out inferior specimens that I wouldn't breed from. So I'd rather utilize them. And when you're not going to make any money on it, I put them in my freezer, because I don't like to waste. So I don't like to just kill and throw in a feed sack. I know some people do that. And that's, I don't have any issues with that personally. That's everybody's own business. But if I can ever utilize an animal, I try to utilize the animals. And I'll tell you what, as many of you that are watching this probably know, Jen, my now wife, she made a comment about the other day.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Congratulations,
yeah,
newly married, newlyweds.
Yeah. I'm
Month
trapped.
Month two here.
What?
Also. Got month 2.
Yeah, month 2. Well, but she went to the grocery store the other day, and she was like, she come back and she goes, "You have any idea how much beef was and how much all this stuff?" I said, "Yeah. Why do you think we butcher these animals?" It's the same reason I have rabbits. I show the rabbits too, just not as much as I do the birds. But I raise all the commercial meat type rabbits. I got a couple breeds, and that's what I like. And the reason I like them is because I can utilize my culls. And we don't spend that money then at the grocery store. I spend it on feed, but I'm putting it in my freezer at least. So it's not the end of the world.
I agree, especially
I'll throw this one
if
in.
Well, I mean, go ahead. But I was just gonna say real quick. If you're raising bantams, it could be a different
Mhm.
story because you have to wait
Yes.
longer. But if you're raising large fowl and anywhere, I suppose you could light. But if you're medium and heavy ducks
Hmm.
and they don't make it, that's a lot of protein, son.
Yeah.
And we raised rabbits, and I like the Netherlands and always had them, but I raised Florida whites
Hmm.
and New Zealand's because those calls they never went anywhere but in the freezer,
Yep.
and it doesn't take that long. On those breeds of rabbits, it doesn't take long. It's like a
Yeah.
Cornish or a broiler. It doesn't take that long. So I mean, it makes perfect sense to me to do that.
Well,
There's
and another thing, I had a friend that his grandma used to make down pillows and stuff like that. People forget about that there's other usable parts as well. So if you keep those down feathers, I mean, if you're that kind of a person that's into that, you can make your own what would you say, bedwear and stuff like
Yes,
that by utilizing the
bedding.
down of a goose.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
to say this, and I
Yeah.
had an incubator customer I worked with. I won't call him out, but he's up in Michigan and ended up getting a niche market for uh, full-grown geese, processed geese. And they go to some high-end restaurant. He gets $150 a piece for one that's processed, which he needed a bigger incubator because he's so far he hasn't glutted that market. So I think he sold 300 last year. So there is, I
Wow.
don't know about around here, but up that way there's a market for, you know,
I have a hard time in my area. For people that don't know, I live in northeastern Wisconsin. I'm not very far away from Lake Michigan. I'm pretty close to Green Bay. So we don't really seem to have that market up here. At least if there is one, I haven't dipped into it yet. Most of the people that I've talked to that do stuff like that will say, "Well, you got to send stuff down to Chicago," and I hate
Right.
that place. So
A
I
metropolitan area like Detroit,
yeah,
Chicago, Cleveland. I mean, even here in Toledo, not so much.
yeah,
It's a different kind of metropolitan market. It's not that
yeah.
maybe there would be in Columbus or Cincinnati,
Hmm.
but I mean, Chicago and Detroit are the two that come to mind
Yeah,
that have I guess you'd call it the clientele that
ethnic
that
yeah,
group.
would,
yeah.
yeah,
You
and
got to have
have
the
the
right
have the
people.
disposable income that want to have that. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yep.
You know, I,
100%.
I mean, the Ruth Chris would it wouldn't go around here either because nobody around here is paying $98 for a damn steak. So but other places,
Yeah.
they're packed. You can't get into them. It's amazing to me. I'm not saying that their quality is wonderful,
Hmm.
but for $18, I'll enjoy what I got instead of $98 for about the same. It's not the same. I understand it's
Yeah.
age and it's all that stuff. I don't have time for that shit. You know, I mean that's
Yeah.
just
We
me.
got a lot of, that's a lot of feed bags right there. For a hundred
Yeah.
Oh, you
bucks.
ain't kidding, man. We can raise a lot of chickens and ducks and geese on that.
Exactly. Well, and the other thing, kind of getting into some of the next stuff is, would be talking about like the males and the females kind of understanding the difference between the sexes and whatnot. And I kind of going to go into a little bit of a judging, I guess, a couple of judging comments um, that I have opinions on. Um, and the first thing kind of is about just being able to understand uh, the mannerisms of geese and even being able to tell the sexes because I've judged before and had questioned some of the sexes of birds that are in the cages before, and sometimes I can tell. Sometimes I question it, so I got to kind of figure out how I'm going to place some depending on that. But for a lot of people that are maybe more inexperienced with it, there are a couple of things that you need to watch and realize. And just for example, like I said, some of the different things about geese, feminine versus masculine. This is something that even when you look in our standard, the standard for pretty much for the descriptions of the breeds of geese are the same, male and female. But when you put a male and a female next to each other, and I'm especially going to say because for most of you that are watching that maybe aren't as experienced with geese, you're going to notice that difference on the Africans and the Chinese. And everybody thinks because of the knobs and whatnot. Usually they got bigger knobs, and you can more obviously see like the bigger heads on the African males and versus the females. That's usually a little bit more obvious versus say like the Emdens, or for me with the tufted Romans, a lot of people can't always tell. And a lot of it, masculine versus feminine. Yeah, your males are a little bit bigger, and that part is in the standard on the weight. But you'll usually notice like even the males are a little bit longer, maybe a little bit wider, and sometimes they have a little bit longer necks. And now that doesn't mean depending on how you're breeding them, it might not always be that way. But a lot of times when you're looking at the birds, even like the skeletal structure, I usually describe a lot of the males to me. I guess I would describe it as some of them appear maybe a little more coarse, like in their silhouettes, versus a goose being maybe more trim and like refined. They have a little bit more of a refined look to them. And that's kind of one way that you can tell. And now granted, and the reason I say depending on how you're breeding them and whatnot is because like I have seen some Tulus up in Canada that are females that have some pretty masculine traits. So that's something where sometimes you might get caught up, or you got to realize that you do have those specimens that it's going to be more difficult to tell. That's kind of like how I am with my Romans. I just gave a bird to a family that I sexed as a female, and I kept looking at him and thinking, man, you look kind of like a gander, you sound like a gander. And I sexed that bird 3 or 4 different times. I even did it when they were at my house, and they took it home and did a DNA sex, and it came back as a gander, not a female. They were supposed to get a female. And sometimes you just have that, or it's just harder to tell. And for the most part, I would say I'm 85 to 90% accurate on the hoof. But I do still get those specimens that it's a little bit harder to tell. But along with some of these other traits, like by sound, ducks, it's easy to tell. When you explain to somebody the sound of the ducks, you go ahead and males are quiet, raspy, right? The females are loud. They say they have that more prominent, like quacking noise. To me, with the geese, I hear the geese are a little maybe lower toned, maybe more of that, I guess you'd call like the traditional, maybe more of the traditional like honk. And the ganders generally a little higher pitched, and to me of that higher tendency to shrieking. So and again, it's not something that to me is always cut and dry for everybody. You do kind of have to be around them for a while and really try to listen and figure out. But then the other thing is watch what they do. And like a gander, a lot of times will be a little more upright in posture. They'll be a little more proud, maybe sometimes paying a little more attention while the females are walking around doing their thing. Versus, the females are sometimes a little lower to the ground. Which is something else. When we talk about like the standard of perfection, they usually give the same body descriptions, and those are actually things that I don't feel are maybe as well defined in our standard, or maybe at all, that I think could and probably should be. My opinion, based off my experience and I read a lot of books too, which if you want to learn about a lot of this stuff, that's where I would recommend. There's a couple of books. Dave Holderried has a book, and he talks a lot about the different types of geese and different things with geese, along with how you rear them, how you raise them, and all about each breed. If you're just getting started, going back to that whole thing, That's a really great book. His book of geese. Daryl Sharaw has a book. I actually got it right next to me so I can see what the titles were. And Oscar Grow has a book. It's his
Get that
standard
at
universal
bantamclub.com.
waterfowl standard. What was that?
You can get that at bantamclub.com. We took that book over.
Oh, yeah,
Probably
yeah,
even
you can.
before my time, but yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah,
It is.
and
I got that book.
Before Dave and
Sharaw has a
Daryl,
book called
before
Duck
Dave and
Goose.
Daryl, that was the only book that was out there for modern
Yeah.
waterfowl. That was it.
Oscar,
So
yeah.
there's actually added on to that library a little bit, but that's
Yeah.
about the only 3 that are out there. The rest of them are more production based.
Yeah, and they're. I mean, the Ashtons have a book too, the Keeping Geese Breeds and Management. That's one as well to look into. But if you want to learn about geese and talk about some of these things, I think that's a good place, definitely, to go. Kind of getting on some of this stuff too about like the judging and the standard and whatnot. Kind of want to hit on again. It's the same description, right? The same description for everything, but a lot of us that judge know what usually wins at the shows in geese, the young birds or the old birds. It's usually the old birds that win. Geese are a little more, I would say a lot of them are a little slower maturing. And some of the geese, especially the heavy breeds, do take a couple years to reach their full potential. And I think a lot about, say, like I think the easiest example goes to the Africans and the Chinese, because you see a young African or a young Chinese, you can definitely tell that they're a young bird compared to the older ones. Those older ones are definitely more mature, maybe more body mass. And again, the weights are different, right? So it's not abnormal. But when you start looking at even like the knobs, generally, at least for me and my experience with the Chinese, of course, my younger Chinese do not get the same size knob that a older Chinese does. And I think that should be expected. But because the old bird, of course, is the old bird, it's more mature, it has that big old knob. Same thing with the Africans. A lot of those African males, they got that protruding knob. And the young ones usually have a little more of a nub rather than that protrusion. They usually pick the old bird. And I think based on the way that the descriptions are. What was that?
While you're talking about the description, I'm going to throw this in there because it used to be a question on the old APA judging test. That bird in the standard is a 2-year-old bird.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a mature bird. So when you're picking young birds, you can't necessarily go by the description in the picture in the standard, because that is a 2-year-old mature bird. You have to make some allowances for that younger bird to get there. So you can't judge those young birds compared to that description and picture, because they're not ever going to get there till they're 2 years old. So that's something they always wanted you in the old days to be aware of. And I don't know that we still probably do that real well, but that bird is a 2-year-old bird.
That's I'm glad you said that, because that's kind of the point that I was going to get to, is that you have to understand, at least this is how I've been mentored with judging waterfowl. You have to understand what is a good bird for a young one and what is good for an old one. And I think the same thing with a female versus a male. You have to understand a masculine bird versus a feminine one to know that they're not going to be exactly the same in those traits. And again, I don't know if I really think that that's expressed very well in the standard, and that's where, to me, that's what I would maybe like to see improved on the descriptions or somewhere in there. Again, just my opinion. There's a lot of people that are going to have a lot of opinions, and I guess
I think that's some of the issues why it's that way, Nate. I think over the years, there was always so few people that were waterfowl centric, and to get them to agree to do that has always been the problem. I don't think it's for the lack of desire over the years, because there's some great water people that were out there that say the exact same thing that you said, but I don't think they were able to come to any kind of consensus to get it done.
Well, and I can see that, because I know a few years back there was some stuff that some wanted to change the body descriptions on some of the birds, and they wanted to add angles versus, like, some of the angles on the ducks is, say, the body is slightly elevated or nearly horizontal, and then some people are like, well, is that this much, is that this much, or is nearly horizontal, is it okay then if they look where the chest is down to the ground, or does it have to be, is it okay if it's up high? And it's like, I understand that the concept of the interpretation there, I get that. And people want less room for that interpretation, but I don't think you're going to get everybody to agree necessarily on what a proper degree is. Not to mention, kind of goes into more of what I want to talk about here. Ducks and geese are not chickens. They don't, if you don't know how to work those birds, they're not going to stand right. So it's not like chickens where, like, we cage train chickens. I honestly, I don't know a ton of people that cage train waterfowl. I do know some that have done it with runner ducks. I know some that have done it with call ducks. But for a lot of people, cage training the waterfowl is taking them to the show and getting them into the cages. And, it's not like the chickens in that way. And if you don't know how to maneuver yourself around the birds, they end up being distressed, and that actually leads to them not showing properly. And that's where I see a lot of issues to me, and people that don't understand waterfowl, or in this case, I'm going to say raise the waterfowl. That's where the discretion lies. So going back to that whole point, my argument still on a lot of this stuff to understand it is what I was told from the day I said I wanted to be a judge was, you need to raise it. You need to raise the birds. And now I know that ducks and geese are big animals, and not everybody has it in their power to be able to do that. And that's understandable. And the only thing that I think anybody can ask after that is to do the work to try to improve. If that means going to a breeder's house and going through their birds when they sort in the fall, or if that means talking to a bunch of breeders at every single show, and not just saying you're going to do it, but actually taking the time to do it and spending 2 hours with a waterfowl breeder at a show, looking at them. Or even though you're a judge, say from the South, and you're not used to waterfowl, but you make a trek up to Wisconsin for the Wisconsin International to see the number of birds that come there so that you can go over it with somebody. I have a lot of respect for somebody that's at least trying to figure it out, because I don't think, I think that's the best way to really understand the birds. I was always told you need to raise them if you want to understand them. And that's where even myself here, I go places, I'll judge somewhere that's not close to Wisconsin at all. And I get there and people say, well, I thought you were a waterfowl guy. I say, well, I raise ducks and geese. I like waterfowl. I raise a lot of them, but I got chickens too. I've had chickens since I was a kid. I have a lot more chickens here than people realize I have. And about the only breed I really honestly show are Langshans. I don't show a ton of the other breeds. A lot of them I have just to work with, play around with. You know how much I hate Leghorn chickens? No offense to anybody out there that raises them. I respect a good one. It's always cool to look at a good one at a show. I don't mind judging them, but I struggled with them when I first started judging. I felt that was a really weak point in what I did. So I got Leghorns. I got rose comb whites, and I had some dark browns, some single comb dark browns. And the reason I did the dark browns, because I don't see a lot of them up here. I wanted to kind of try to learn to understand the color a little better. And I got the rose comb whites just to work with them. Obviously, rose comb, a little something different. But also, I got those from Jeff Shank at the time. So they were pretty good for rose comb white leghorns. And it was to learn and better understand. And there's no better way to do that than hatching a handful. Even if you only had them for 2 years, that's all I had them for. I think 1 or 2 breeding seasons at the most. I hatched a handful. I go through them. I'd ask questions. I would send pictures to a couple of people and say, hey, what do you know, or what do you think about this one? Am I looking at the right thing with this one? Do I like this, or is this a bad trait? Like, would you consider this a quality specimen? And I'd kind of correlate it to what I was thinking and what I was interpreting to see if I was on the right page. I think that's what people need to do, because then you go ahead and you get, even if you only hatched 20 chicks, 20 chicks still makes you look at the birds and call, even if you're trying to get down to 2 or 3 just to keep for one more season. It's better than nothing, and it helps train and develop your eye.
Also, it gives you
a
a better comfort level when you go to that class. I think we've talked on here, many times before about when I first started. There's 2 that I really hated to get: medium ducks and moderns, just because that wasn't my thing. Didn't like them, didn't want them. So you had to make that concerted effort to go to those modern breeders and learn. And I went to the medium duck guys and some waterfowl guys to help me with those, so I could at least do so I could make myself happy when I was done. So I think all of us do that. You're always going to have something you're not great at, and you need to.
Well, it's the same way. When I start, I don't know if I still do it, but like when I took the APA exam, and when I should have took it the first time, they asked what breeds and varieties you raised.
Mm-hmm.
And good Lord, I had so much stuff on there I forgot. I mean, it was probably 80% of the standard. Now, did I do real well in them? No. Some I just had for a year or 2, but it gives you an appreciation that when you see a good one, you might not know everything, but I know that is a good one.
Yeah.
And I think it helps give you that when you get in. Now, I still struggle with waterfowl, and I've had waterfowl all my life because I've had them, but they were never, ever a center of attention. Now, my big Toulouse, loved them. Loved my Ellsbury's. I end up really, really liking the magpies. And so after raising them the first year, I actually went out there and sat in the yard with them and looked at the standard and read it and looked at them.
Mm-hmm.
Because at that time, magpies weren't very popular. Then they got real popular, like 2 or 3, and we did real well with them. And I found out breeding how to do it, and I thought, well, there's no mystery. Now, what do I still struggle on? I still struggle on buff ducks. I struggle on cayugas. If I don't see one that I feel is the correct size, not a great big frickin' black duck, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I mean that. Other than that, I mean, you can get comfortable. Where I'm not gonna. But please, I would like to find, if you got classes, and let's just say you have 20 cayugas, 5, 5, 5, and 5. But I did find the best one, best cock, best hen, old duck, best cockerel, best young. And maybe you don't get which one of those 4 is the best, but you've got the 4 best.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is a process, and I've always struggled with. I don't know why I loved American Buffs. I struggle in American Buffs half the time. I don't know why I struggle in American Buffs, but I do, and I have an African some because, truthfully, I do not like Africans. Now, I don't know why I don't like Chinas. I like a good one. And a good one sticks out. I mean, sticks freaking out to me. But the rest of them, it's just one of those things,
Well, and I guess the way I've always thought about it too is so with APA and the ABA, I got a general license. that means I am qualified.
Yes.
In theory, I am qualified
Yes.
to judge everything. So I know that I'm not always going to be the best at everything because of the broad spectrum of breeds that we have. But
Of everything, yeah, because that everything's a lot of stuff, man.
but I want shows to be able to call me and have me judge. And even though I might not be the best at something, I want to be good at everything. When I pick a bird, I want somebody to be like,
Right.
even though I didn't think that was the best one, you still picked a
I
good
can
one.
see it. Right.
Yes.
It's that I can see it. I can see where you're going. I can see why you did it. And then maybe, they'll say, I'd have picked this bird. And then, of course, the question that we should ask is, why? Tell
Yeah.
me what you see that I can't see, because you could know the scale of points and everything, but it's still a scale, right? So between a half and 2 points. Well, what's a half and what's two?
Mm-hmm.
It's that way. I think that for a judge, the overall thing you should be is proficient.
Yeah.
Where maybe and there'll be times you totally screw up. And usually when you're done with that class, you'll walk back through and go, oh shit. And you know it. And if you know it, that's a good thing because you can correct it.
Yeah.
But if you just blind, oh, I picked it, so that's the best. Well, no, you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're doing the show a disservice because them same people paid the exact same amount of money to be there.
Right.
So you should
Right.
try. You should
Everybody
try
puts
to be
in
efficient.
everybody puts in time. I see it as
Yes.
all the exhibitors are putting in time, they're putting in money, they're putting in effort. So I want to try to ensure that I'm doing the best job that I can. And by doing the best job that I can, I think is by continually learning and trying to emphasize on my weak points to try to make it better, because I do like judging more than just waterfowl. I do like judging all of the species.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Exactly. And
Yeah.
some of this, Nate, doesn't fall on the judge. Some of it falls on whoever the committee is that picks
yeah.
who's judging what of the show, right? I mean, and I'm going to say this, and I'll tell this on myself. I was judging a show one time, and it was Lou Cunningham, and it was Tim Bowles, and they told me to do waterfowl. And I said, "Are you out of your mind? Why would you do that?" Well, I said, "No, it's not. I can do it, but I think it's a disservice to the people that are showing
Yeah.
because that leaves less room. I mean, that's one less thing that as a show secretary or the judges committee or whoever the hell does it in the show, maybe you should work to what the known strengths of the judge, if you can. And if there's something that it doesn't mean you can't judge them, but you prefer. If
Mhm.
you were an exhibitor, would you want me doing your cayugas? Or would you want Lou Cunningham or you or someone that actually and judges a shit ton of waterfowl? Now you don't have to do all the classes, but
Right.
that would really be kind of neat for a change. Or
Yeah.
here's one. I'm going to get in the soapbox. Here's one. How about instead of making everything a frickin' mystery? How about they say, Nate, I want you to judge Jesus' name the show, and you'll say, okay, and here's what you're going to judge. And so if there's something in that 4 or 5 classes that we plan on you judging that you have time to refresh yourself in the standard before you ever hit that frickin' show hall.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be kind of neat? Because in every other thing, they say exactly what when the people enter, they know who's judging the Angus. They know who's judging the sporting class. They know who's judging whatever and whatever show you go to, where there's actual money. We're chicken people and waterfowl people, and they act like someone's going to cheat for what? What is there?
Mm-hmm.
But
Another
there's no
point
money. There's no bribes.
another point I'll put in there, because we're getting on this judging thing, but after you've been at it a while, or if you've been breeding a while, you'll get pigeonholed. God, Mike, how many years did all I ever judge is rose-colored clay legs? I
And
never, Every show I went,
and
oh, you're a Wyandotte guy. You get roast completely. And I think there was probably, I told him there was by 8 shows in a row. I did the roast completely class in every one of them. I said, these people are getting sick of me. So you can get pigeonholed by your reputation. Just like you don't want to judge waterfowl all the time. You want to get in and do some chickens. Last year at Kentucky was one of the first times I've got put on waterfowl for a long time, and actually had a really good day. I enjoyed it. It's the pace is different. The looks are different. It's a little easier deal than having to throw 400 Old English in 2.5 hours. So you get pigeonholed. I think as you get older, probably some of that's less because they're not afraid to put you on some of that other stuff. When you first start, that's the problems with a lot of people when they first start. They'll get chunked on some things they're not comfortable with, but you just got to work through it. And like Mike says, you do your best, and hopefully, if you're not doing your best, you'll learn from it. I know I'm not afraid to do cayugas and buff ducks no more. Probably not the best one, but I'm not afraid to do it. I'll get in there and give my best.
Right.
And I learned to like moderns over the years too. So, it's one of those things. I think the older you get, the more comfortable you are in all the classes. I used to just dearly pay to do guineas. Now I have no problem going and doing guineas. I kind of enjoy that.
I still always have respect for somebody that if I don't agree, but I come up to you and I ask, what were you seeing at the time that you judged, or why did you place the way that they do? And a judge can tell me I placed because of this reason, this reason, this reason, even if I don't maybe agree with that reason.
You got to be able to do that as a judge. I always tell everybody when they're clicking for me, I mark the cards for a reason. Mm-hmm. Number one, the exhibitor can come ask me later, and then I know what the hell I did without having to handle the bird again. But it also lets me go through the classes. When you mark those cards the way you see them as you're going along, then when you go back and make your decision, it's easier to do that. If you just leave it blank and then you're looking, and I've seen judges that way where they're lost in the class and they handle the same bird 10 times. And that's just some tips when you first start. You got to have some process to sort them out. Then you have to, in the old days, we don't get it a lot anymore because we're in and out so fast. But in the old days, when I first started, you had to go justify why you did this. And the guy's going to know why that one's 4th and 5th, or that one's 3rd or 4th. Well, you got to have some process in your mind where you can explain that using good data in the standard, that's how you come to that conclusion. So you're exactly right there.
Well, I'm okay with talking for a while longer. I got a few more things if you guys are.
No, we're good.
Okay.
We're boycotting the Super Bowl, so we're good. Screw Bad Bunny.
The Packers aren't playing, so is there really a reason to watch? I mean, let's be real.
That would be the main reason for me to watch is they weren't playing, but my teams aren't in either, so I don't really give 2 shits. Seattle's up 9-0, by the way. I have it on just the thing. I can't see nothing but the score.
This might hurt some feelings.
I'm not watching it either.
I hope that the Seahawks win. And the reason
they're ahead.
Wing is because Sam Darnold played for the Vikings last year, and he did pretty good for the Vikings, and they decided they didn't need him anymore. So I just sorry to all my and all the
they needed that Michigan man. There's a compounding conundrum. We won't go there.
I was rooting for that old Ohio State coach over there at New England.
Yeah, me too.
Well, anyway, so a couple of other things I was going to say, like when we're talking about the geese and the young birds, there are things that you can also, there are some breed specific things that tell that some birds are young. And like one of those is some of the white varieties will have gray on them as young birds, which is not a DQ for some of those breeds. But I do know that there are some judges that have DQ'd them because they didn't realize it was a DQ. On a young bird, it's not a DQ. On an old bird, different story. But on a young white goose, especially for the Romans and stuff, it's not a DQ. That's something that a lot of people miss. But another thing is I'm going to bring up the Toulouse. A gray Toulouse, young Toulouse, gray Toulouse will have gray on its bean. This is more of a pet peeve of mine, is people showing old birds in the young bird class and thinking that a lot of judges can't tell. Now, you do get some of those phenomenal specimens that are either hatched early or very well structured, very mature looking for a young bird. And I have a couple ways.
Goose.
What was that?
18-month-old young goose.
Yes. Well, and something I do, and I know not everybody likes to handle geese. I don't do it all the time, but I do it for certain things. Is you check their foot pads, kind of like a duck. Now, your heavier geese will get calloused faster, but you know the callousing is generally something that happens to ducks and geese, and especially as they age. So I can look at birds. There are some specimens I'd question, but you can usually tell a lot of times, oh, this one is definitely an old bird versus this one is a young bird. But like on the Toulouse, having that gray in there, and I see people showing young Toulouse that do not have that young grays. And then also I know people have sold Toulouse to individuals, said they were young, and I can look at them and tell you those are not young Toulouse. They are crappy old birds. And some people do get taken for that, which is kind of a sad situation, but it does happen. I've also been told, and I guess I haven't quite checked this very much, but I've been told that apparently like the trachea on some of those geese, as they're more mature, it'll be more hardened versus a young goose not quite having that same feel. That's something that I've been told that I have not practiced. So I guess if anybody wants to try that out and see what if there's any truth behind that, that's something that I have not practiced that I should. But something that I had in here as well that's not goose related, but on ducks, I just thought I'd throw it in because it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine as well. A lot of your old birds, your old drakes, their bills peel when they're an old bird versus a young bird. Some of the young ones, as they get older, will start to do the peeling deal, but when you see it quite a bit, the old drakes, their bills peel, and that's a good notification that it's actually an old bird. Which now, to me, that's not a condition issue. I have people that argue that with me, that they try to say that's a condition issue. I do not see that as a condition issue. I see it as a seasonal and an age thing that occurs to the birds. No different than hens laying eggs and their legs get pale and their face get pale. It's the same concept. To me, that's not a condition problem, and that's the reason I don't think it's a condition problem, because they didn't do anything to themselves to wreck that. That's strictly biological. And kind of getting on the judging thing, I've a lot of people, to me, like I said before, they're not like ducks, they're not like chickens, but you do have to understand what the birds are like. The big thing to geese, whether you're raising them, showing them, judging them, is you want them to stay calm. And some people probably thinking, oh, well, no shit, Nate, you want all these birds to stay calm. And yeah, but there is a big factor to how those birds will act, and even in the case of when they're young, how they will grow. If they are not calm and they are stressed, they will not grow very well. And in the show hall, they will not act the same. That's when people, I've heard people say, oh, that goose stuck its head in the corner all day long and it wouldn't show. Yeah, sometimes that happens. Sometimes you can't do anything about it because that's what the bird wants to do. Sometimes it's about how you as the judge are looking at them, because geese do not like you being over top of them.
I want to stop you. You know how I used to always tell a good waterfowl judge is how he approached the cage.
Mm-hmm.
you just said a whole mouthful there. If they're running up there, grabbing a hold of the tag and putting a number on it and getting that goose all stirred up and not really paying attention, I think you noticed me at Kentucky. I was 12 foot back from the cages, so because they had them in hog pens. Some of them were in goose cages. But you got to let it settle down and do its natural thing. Even with call ducks or any kind of duck, you cannot just run up on there and get them all stirred up. You're not going to get a good look at them. If I could judge call ducks from 3 aisles over, I'd do it, because that's when you see what they truly look like. And I found the same thing, especially with the bigger geese, and for having palms for quite a while. My palms did not like being in those cages. They did not like being out of their pasture, and you had to back up a little bit and let them settle down. But if you got right up there on them and there's 10 people in the aisles, and it's not a good situation for geese. So I always can tell a good waterfowl judge by how he approaches the animal's cage. And I can tell a bad one by how they do that as well. So sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I had to interject.
No, I'm glad you said that, because then it's not just me.
No.
Preaching.
Ellsbury's the same way. If you get back from Ellsbury, a good one, you can see that line. If you go rushing up there, they'll draw up. You'll think, well, that thing hasn't got any keel. Yeah, it does. It did when you were 20 foot away from it. You know, you have to. You can't be in a rush. Yeah, you could judge waterfowl quicker because most of the time we don't handle them all. But you can't be in a rush. You have to have a pace to you to judge it.
Yeah. Yep, and that's 100% how I feel about it, because like I said, they don't like to be on top of you. And actually, sometimes my favorite way to judge geese is to stand 2 aisles back, and that's where I might hurt some feelings here a little bit, but showroom etiquette. There's a lot of people out there, and by no means am I coming on here to say that I'm a perfect human. I'm not yelling at anybody, but I will say in the last couple of years, I have seen some people that I think are just unaware of what it is that they are doing. And some of that stuff is, say, standing over top of those geese, standing over top of those ducks and making them uncomfortable. I was at a show a couple of years ago, and it's not picking on any particular breed, but there was a handful of people watching the Old English judging. And I know people get really lasered in, really focused, but they weren't just watching the chicken judging. They were standing and leaning on the goose cages with the geese in them. And I went up to some of those people and I said, do you by chance see what you're doing? I'm like, do you see you're making those birds pace back and forth? You can see the trail that they are leaving in their shavings because they are so uncomfortable with you being there. That'd be like me going over here and hitting the top of your Old English cages back and forth while they're getting judged. And the worst part about it was the judge was trying to judge the geese at the same time that they were doing that. The other thing is there was a show, and this has nothing to do with the show staff, how the cages were set up. At this show, I liked how the cages were set up, but the goose cages, a lot of times they're set up on the outsides of buildings, which is fine. I appreciate that. I like that. I appreciate that. You kind of get the geese away from the main flow of people. I think that's great because it's better for them. It makes them calmer. It makes them show better, and it doesn't stress them out. Well, there's a lot of people that were showing some really fluffy chickens that have to plug in hair dryers, and there wasn't a lot of outlets available, and they were physically, and the reason this is close to me is because they did it to my birds, and they ruined I'm going to say that they ruined my birds because they were moving my goose cages to plug in their hair dryers, and they didn't realize what they were doing to the geese. And I, at that show, was showing several young geese, and it was one of their first shows. And those young geese at their first show, you really want to make sure that they can stay as calm as possible. After those first couple shows for a young goose, a lot of them will do really, really well. They'll get used to it. But when they go to that first show and they're away from home it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter if you cage train them at home. If you bring them there, they're going to be uncomfortable. And when you are somebody that's on top of them, you're moving their cage, and you're blow drying a chicken or something on top of that cage. You just ruined an exhibitor's animal if you didn't realize it. Stress or
spatial awareness.
What was that?
A lot of people have no spatial awareness or no realization that there are other people, whether it's in the frickin' grocery aisle and they're in the middle of the aisle with their cart and standing by the side because it's like nobody else is alive.
Yeah.
And that's not right. You should have an awareness where everything is at all times. I mean, sometimes it's like, oh shit. I mean, even if it's not your thing, whatever it is. I mean, it would be really nice. That's just common respect of everybody else, because you paid the same thing. You drove a long way. You spent the money. You spent the entry fee. So you deserve to have yours at your very best too. Whether you like the person, if they don't, I mean, I'm not saying that they did this because they didn't know you like you. I mean, if you don't
Right.
know the person, it makes no difference. Common decency.
Yeah. Well, and it's no different. I mean, I don't think this is extremely off topic, but I think it's really ignorant when people make a comment like, oh, you don't have to do much to condition a duck or a goose. You just throw them in the pool and they clean themselves. And I think that's an extremely ignorant comment when somebody says that. So it's like, you got that bird in that cage that basically was just ruined. Is like, do you have any idea how hard it is to keep a white goose clean? Like, remember what geese and ducks and stuff like to do? They like to play outside. They don't like to be inside, and all that stuff we just talked about. Like, even though you're not spending the time with them in the way you're spending with a chicken, they have their own sets of challenges. And the harder part, I would argue, for getting a goose is getting the goose to the show in the same shape that you grabbed it in when you brought it to the show.
Put it in the truck. Yeah.
Right. Versus the chicken that you just put in the box and lays in the box the whole way that you get to the show. People talk about how hard it is to keep a white chicken white. You have any idea how hard it is to keep a white goose white? And every little thing, they're playing in that water all the time. You know what else they do? They go and they drill their bills in the mud and they put that in the water, and then they swim in that water, and they swim in it over and over and over and over. And so when you go ahead and you spend all that time doing everything that you can for that animal, and for a lot of people that raise geese, we're not bringing a truck with chickens in the truck bed. We're bringing a trailer because we have to. And it's a lot of work. Like I said, it presents its own sets of challenges. That person didn't do any less work getting that bird ready than somebody that was fixing up a chicken, as far as I'm concerned. That's my opinion. I agree. I guess that's my point. That's kind of my little soapbox thing. Like I said, I'm not picking on any people in particular. I'm not saying that I'm a perfect person, but because even I've caught myself maybe doing certain things. It's no different than, people running up and down aisles. You shouldn't be doing that around them either. That's
or dragging a dog down. The worst one is when I'm glad most of them don't allow, but bringing dogs to shows. Most of the birds aren't used to that, or they don't like it, and I've seen them screw up a bunch of birds too.
Well, and there's some people that say on that topic, and I know there are very well-behaved dogs out there, and I know some people that have the dogs at the shows, and I'm not condemning anybody or talk about anybody in particular, but I do know, so there I've heard folks say before things like, oh, well, my dog's used to the birds. Right, but the bird's not used to the dog.
Yep.
And you can't take that away from the bird. So I've seen eruptions of animals from a dog walking through before, regardless of how calm the dog is, or all of a sudden it gets a hair to go ahead and jolt. It happens. That's my that's my showroom etiquette, I guess. The whole thing with the judging and the waterfowl, I still think I'm not a person that likes to use a stick on the waterfowl. My own personal preference. So sometimes I do think it's all right, but it's not my preference to use it, especially when we're talking about the geese. I see it like cattle, working cattle. You know, if you it's about standing in the right place for them to move and do what you want. And that's kind of how I see the geese. If you know how to move in the right way, you'll get the bird to do the same thing. So that's my point. And in terms of handling the birds, like you said, we don't really handle them very much. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't. Doesn't mean you can't. I guess if you're not comfortable with handling a goose, I definitely would not. I have seen some birds that have certain issues, say with their wings, and it just throws me off a little bit. So I pulled them out and I check them, and they do have a crooked spine or something like that. So I've caught that, or like I said, you check in the feed, or I've caught birds that have underbites. Lobes. Yeah, and I actually have that on. That's like the next thing is the lobes. But you know the one major thing, and I don't know that anybody would do this, but I've always been told, like even when we're talking about sexing a bird, as a judge, I would never sex somebody's goose on site without their permission. Just because if you don't do it right or you hurt that animal or something, then to me, you're liable. And if somebody did that to my bird, I'd be pretty pissed. So that's kind of my opinion on that as well.
Also,
there's
you don't
not
know
a reason to not. What?
If there's an egg in there or not either.
Yeah.
That's the other issue.
Yep.
Which would make
Well,
it
like
really you laid it right before you were sexing.
Right. Yeah. Well, and now so that whole concept of lobes, that's kind of, I'm getting towards the end of my page here, but the concept of lobes, that is something that a lot of people don't seem to understand, and that is something that's in the standard is the description. But I guess like for me, I know I would love to see, I don't know if there's a good way to do this, but I would love to see maybe a picture of lobes, like a bird that's got lobes, a bird with a paunch underneath that's tight underneath, or even when we talk about the Africans and the Chinese, to me, the way I read the standard, the African knob and a Chinese knob is not the same. So to me, I think a lot of people don't quite understand that. So that's something that I know I would like to see, because when you get on the concept of lobes, right? A lot of people don't realize what they are, but a lot of the breeds are dual lobed or are tight underneath, where they really don't want a lobe, or maybe they're allowable on a paunch, or like, you know, the Pomeranians, they want one lobe. And I know this is a question I get a lot of times from some people is, well, like if they're a dual lobe bird, how many points do you deduct for missing a lobe or having uneven lobes? Because if they're dual, you want them to be even lobes. How many points do you deduct? You know, I'm not sure myself if I have a great answer for that. And because then people,
you're talking to a guy that got beat by a lot of dual lobe palms back in the day. So yeah.
Well, and I believe the palm standard says it's a serious defect, isn't it?
Yes.
But a lot of the other breeds, it doesn't say like, oh, it's a serious defect to be. And now this is going to be my other thing here, talking about lobes. I understand you want even lobes, and when you're talking about geese, I definitely think a dual even lobed birds is, without a doubt, that's what the standard says. That's the most correct thing that you can have. Now, if you have a gander with a single lobe or uneven lobes, to me, that's more. It's more important that a gander is even dual lobed as an old and young bird than an old goose. And the reason I say this is because a lot of times with the old geese, with the females, their lobes will change when they come into sexual maturity and reproduction, because it's like any other, even chickens, they get baggier in their rear. Ducks do the same thing. So the same thing happens with geese. And a lot of times on an old goose, you'll see one lobe will suck up or one will really drop. And some of the descriptions on certain breeds want you to stay away from bagginess. Africans, they get really loose, they get baggy. That's kind of a pet peeve of mine on Africans. I think that's more of a genetic thing, something that you need to breed for, is continuing to keep them, keep the longevity, keep them tight. But like some of these other breeds with the dual lobes, if you have a female that starts laying and all of a sudden one lobe kind of sucks up, but she's not like a baggy bird, she's not falling apart, my opinion is that how is, because that's correlated to reproduction, how is that any different than a leghorn with pale legs or a pale face? So I've had judges try to challenge me on that. That's my opinion, and that part about is in the standard. And even waterfowl, it says in the beginning of the book, it talks about weight fluctuations. Weight fluctuations in waterfowl are serious depending on times of the year. They're a more seasonal bird. It says you're supposed to take that into consideration. So people want to challenge on the lobe thing. Now, I do think if I had a bird if I had two old geese, two old females, and one was even, and they were pretty even birds, I thought that they were equal. And I had one with perfect dual lobes as an old goose, and I had one that was uneven, well, I would definitely be picking the even dual lobe bird. How do you argue against that, right? So I hope people can kind of follow my logic, but that's always been my opinion. That's how I view that. It's just like we can kind of get on this bill and leg color thing, because a lot of geese have incorrect leg color. And I wanted to get my standard out so that I could go ahead and kind of tell people. But if you look at, I hear, and I do, it bugs me as much as the next guy when a pink-footed goose has orange legs or an orange-legged goose has pink legs. I think that bugs a lot of people. And you see geese win. And I've had this conversation with a lot of waterfowl people, and some of the more respected judges have asked them the question, so what do you do with that bird? Do you DQ it if it's a pink-legged bird versus an orange-legged bird, but it has the other color leg? I said, do you DQ it? Nobody will tell me yes. But what's the reason? A lot of them kind of have a hard reason. I have some reason. And if you look at the legs and toes in the standard, it's a total of 3 points for legs on the geese scorecard, right? 2 for shape, 1 for color. How important, I guess, is that color if we're looking at the leg color and it's only 1 point? Not to say that it doesn't matter. Well, you say, well, Nate, it's still incorrect. But what some people don't realize is how leg color is affected in geese. Because I've seen it firsthand. I've seen leg color change in birds. Same with the bill color. I'll give that example with the tufted Romans. I remember one year in particular, I had a Roman gander. This was several years ago. I loved him, thought he was a great bird. Pure pink colored bill, right? And the standard for a tufted Roman says pinkish to reddish orange. When it came breeding season, that following spring, his bill turned completely orange. So they can change due to hormones, yeah, due to hormones, and the leg color, the same thing. But the other thing is, I've been trying to do some research on the whole idea of the pigmentation, and I think it was Michael that I was talking to about it, because I was more doing the studying for the chickens, and he was talking about, I don't know if I say this right, the carotenoids in the grass, and anything green. Yeah, and it affects carotenoids, and it affects the pigmentation. Well, I know people that have raised waterfowl on sand. I have a friend that had Emdens. The Emdens were at a different place where they were raised up on sand, and they didn't have access to any grass. And when they went to his place, within a month or a month and a half, they went from pink to orange when they got out on pasture. and had grass. Now, I've also seen the same thing with Tulus from season to season. I'll pick them up and you can look at them and be like, oh, well, it's not quite pink, but it's not quite orange. It's kind of pinkish orange, and you'll get that in between. Going back to that Roman, his bill changed to orange, and then the following spring, he was back to pink. And sunlight matters too. Sunlight is really important for stimulation on geese, for obviously for any birds for laying and whatnot, but it's also important for the ganders for breeding. But that sunlight makes a big deal. And I know it does firsthand because when I first got Chinese, going back to that whole judging thing, I never really liked Chinese for a long time. Actually, when it came to geese, they were my most misunderstood breed. So I got a hold of a friend and I said, hey, I want to learn about Chinese. So I'd like to have a couple of good pairs here that breed them and stuff like that. So I bought a couple of good pairs so that I could sit and look at them and try to train my eye. And that winter was my first winter with them. I was so afraid of those geese getting frostbite for whatever silly reason. I put them in the barn and I kept them in the barn. I never put them outside. I kept them in the barn for several months. Obviously they had food, they had water. Their black bills and knobs started changing orange. They were losing the pigmentation in their bills and knobs. And when I put them back outdoors, they went back to black within a month. They went back to black. And after that, I never did that ever again. Even now, I still let them go outside and I've never had that problem ever again. And part of that is sunlight. And I can say the same thing for anything with a pink or an orange bill. It's the same thing. Now they will get lighter in color too because of the laying, but I have done some consulting work for hatcheries, and the one particular hatchery, their geese were inside and they had windows, but the geese were inside all the time. And you could tell they were inside because they had the palest pink bills. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but somehow I might've got some birds from a hatchery one time that was inside. And, when I brought them home, again, within a couple months of getting them outside in the sun and on the grass, their bills brightened up. So there is, my point being is that some people try to put a lot of emphasis on that, and I have a hard time because I do think it's important. I think bill and leg color is a breed characteristic. I think it's important. A lot of it is indeed genetic. You can select for it for sure. You can definitely select for it. I've seen it. I know of some lines of birds where they don't have the issue with the pigmentation of it going from orange to pink, and that's because, or vice versa, and that's because they've selected for it for years to be that bright orange color. But I've also seen, and this is just due to what I have seen, what I know, and that's the only thing that I can lead and see is hormonal, environmental feed.
I'll throw another one in there. So I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate enough many years ago to work on a standard revision for Pomeranians. So Pomeranians all of a sudden popped into the standard. There was never a qualifying meet. They were just not in there, and then they were in there. So Craig Russell from Pennsylvania, who's like the godsend upholstery history, and we researched Pomeranians over in Pomerania. So over there's solid color Pomeranians. So there's whites, grays, buffs, and then the saddleback, which is what we have recognized, was a variation. But in Pomerania, they were pink-footed, pink-billed. When we put them in, we got a pink bill and an orange foot, which is like probably not the best way to do it. So we tried to correct that. Could not get it done, just like with the dual and single low. But what was found out in all this research is they actually crossed them with Scandia geese, which are yellow-footed, yellow-billed, but they carried that Pomeranian color. So that was actually how they introduced the Pomeranian color into the Pomeranian geese, was with these Scandia geese. Same thing. I even went back so far as to when the original Sebastibles were imported. The original Sebastibles were pink-footed, pink-billed. That's the way they were. John Kreiner, this is a good story for some of the historians. Old John Kreiner and young John Kreiner. Old John Kreiner was 1,000,000 years, and young John was 1,000,000 - 1. They were, when I was a kid, they were both in their up. I think old John was already gone, but young John was almost 90 some. But old John wouldn't give young John any Sebastibles for his show string. So he crossed them with barnyard geese. So that's why your Sebastibles have some foot problems too, because originally they were pig-footed, pig-billed all the way around, but they were crossed up so he could get some to show. And some of them lines are still around today that carry a little more yellow in their feet and bills than what they should. So some of it's not all environmental. I know those two breeds.
Yep.
Actually had piles of information that Craig and I did and presented to the standard committee. You know what they did? Absolutely nothing, because the scourge was on. So I know what it's like to try to get some of that stuff changed, and there's always going to be several sides to all of it. So
on a breeding standpoint, to me, obviously all those things can affect your color, but genetically it has to be there and be able to happen. Yep. So like for me with breeding geese, I let's put it this way. I try to do things the right way, I guess, the way I say it, or the way I think I should be doing it, so that I don't have to deal with those factors, so that I can select on a genetic standpoint, because I want genetically I want birds that are genetically have that correct color and not have to be worried about
the same
color.
Pig-footed, pig-billed, single lobe. Anything else was gone, and that's the only way you correct that stuff. The bad thing is
the Fergusons have done, and they've done a really great job breeding the Poms out there in New York, because I know that was a conversation I had with Kelsey and Jackie. That was one of the biggest things that they did right away, because a lot of Pomeranians out there across the country, most of them don't have the right bill and leg colors,
and double lobe come into play, because guess what? Double lobe geese lay more eggs than single lobe geese. So if you're in the situation where you're trying to get goslings out, that's how that come about. And a well-known breeder did that to him just because he was selling day olds and hatching eggs and got more production that way.
That always it surprises me how the Pomeranians call for that versus a lot of the other breeds wanting to be dual lobed.
And it goes back to the original one. So it's not to kill all the time, but it's a rustic foraging goose over in Pomerania that was, the farmer had just out there, and that was their original profile. They had to be able to make it out in the fields, and we got into making it a show goose, and some of them old time breeders were totally against them ever being recognized, because they thought they would lose some of that ruggedness. They got them over refined, got them more looking like when they shouldn't actually be. They should be more of a rougher looking goose. That's my Pomeranian spiel. That's probably why I don't have them no more, other than not having room for them.
See, and
I dearly
for
love
them,
they were great geese, and one of my favorite geese.
I love looking at the Poms out on the yard and stuff, but if they are, in my opinion, of the geese that I've had, when it comes to the temperament, they're the least on my list. They're some of my least favorite, but they are some of the more beautiful birds. However, I would definitely say for anybody starting, it's maybe not the best, because it's more of a numbers game, trying to learn how to breed that. And then, like you're saying, you got to deal with the lobes. But I will say, table bird, Pomeranian is great table bird.
And very little feed. I mean, you talk about one that can get by on pasture. That's definitely one.
Yes.
I was always wanting to get some of the solid color ones, because I think that'd be a whole different game.
Yeah.
And there was a man in Brian Witt down in North Carolina or South Carolina. He had them, would never let them go for that reason. He was a purist and wasn't sharing them. And I don't know if Brian's even still with us, but he was a big Muscovy duck guy as well. And he made all those crazy colors of Muscovies. But at one time he had solid color Poms, gray, buff, and white, and then the saddlebacks.
Mm-hmm. So I that's really all I've got, I think, on my.
I got one more throw at you. Mike and I is old enough to remember old Bill Garber and his Sebastopol geese. So Bill would come into one of our shows around here with a whole pile of them. And Bill wasn't a very big guy, But he always told us that a Sebastopol goose should sit right in a bushel basket. It should be a roundish oval shape. You know, they told us about the curl, and lately I see all these square bodied Sebastopols, which to me is incorrect. I know they tried to change that, but I don't go for it just because I'm old enough to see the original ones. And there's a few lines out there that are like that, and I run into them every now and then. But I see an awful lot of what I call, they're almost rectangular body, which isn't right for that goose in my mind.
Yeah. So when it comes to that, I agree with you 100%. They need to have that ovular shape to them. And I think there could be a couple reasons for this. Number one, genetics. I don't think the genetics are exactly there for a lot of them, especially when you're talking about like these, a lot of smooth breasted birds, and birds just lacking in obvious feather quality. But you know, I get to see a lot of good Sebastopols up by me because I compete with against the Luns all the time.
They go back to Garber.
And what I'll say about those guys, and some of the bit of conversations like that I've had with Terry and Kaylin, is a lot of the Sebastopol game, not just genetics, but is conditioning. And those guys definitely know how to condition a Sebastopol goose, because if you don't condition them well, it can ruin the feathers. From my understanding, you know, a bad rain can dampen those feathers, and you're done for the whole show season. I'd always be curious to see some of these birds that I can see at potential, and wonder what would happen, say if the Lunds took them, or I guess Schleichers and Lunds took them, and what they would do with them if they were able to condition them. Would they be the same quality genetically, that they would have that feather, that they would have that there? I mean, based off those conversations I've had with them, that's a big part of that breed. It's a breed that I have never raised. I don't know if I will ever raise them, because I think I would need to build special buildings or something just for them with the pasture. I know they have pastures with a lot of green grass, and it's, you know, how they do it. They definitely have a system.
There's definitely no mud.
Yeah. You can't have mud around with these birds.
You know, Garber, he fed a tremendous amount of oats on his Sebastopols. That was one of his, because oats fiber feather. You know, that link, and he believed in oats, and he rolled the oats to him.
Another thing, he also had them in a real deep pasture. And correct me if I'm wrong, right? It was an apple orchard or a peach orchard. They were in under trees, but they were in real heavy grass.
I think they're in an apple orchard under the trees, because they had light, but there was about like Marcus Davidson with his buffs. They were outside, beautiful, but they did not direct sunshine. I mean, they could get in and out and under all those trees, and real deep, lush grass. Deep.
Yeah.
He was a specialist.
Ones, and I've looked at their geese, and they're gorgeous, but theirs remind me of his, because number one, they're the right size. You know, we've had them too big, too small, but theirs the right size. And I always think, you know, if I put that thing in a bushel basket, it's going to fill that bushel basket up. So they got them the right body shape and the right size, I think.
Well, they have good proportion and balance as well, especially when you talk about going for the neck through the head. Yep. A lot of birds, a lot of these types of geese, you know, apart from like the Chinese, a pet peeve of mine is seeing, I call them snake-necked or swan-necked birds, because they don't carry that thickness of the neck through to the skull. To me, a lot of that is usually it's a structural issue. I know another big controversy with the Sebastopols, I don't know if I really want to get into this, but is a lot of the wings are messed up.
We do.
Yeah, their wings are twisted, and I understand that people try to tell me that, well, it's a genetic thing that comes because of the feathering. And I mean, some people tell me they have the problem and it doesn't bother them, and some people tell me that they don't. I'm not a Sebastopol breeder. I guess I'm not going to get into that. That's not a topic I want to step on.
Yeah, so very few of them have been at it a while.
Yeah.
And then we had all the crazy color crosses coming in. So on one hand, I can count the Sebastopol breeders that are doing the breed justice, and then the rest of them are just multiplying them. So, there's only one color recognized, and in my mind, that's the only one that has any decent quality. I mean, I've seen a few of the crosses, and they might be, so, but I think it's just the old lineage that Brian Decker coined is what you tolerate is what you have. So you tolerate the bad things, you're going to have it. If you don't, you don't. I would bet that there's not any in Lund's flock that carry that.
And in terms of like the colored Sebastopols, I know there was somebody working on them, a couple people, and I judged them a couple different times, and I do think they still have a little ways to go. And we discussed the standard and what kind of standard they were following, but they were making improvements. I'll give them that, that they were making improvements on the buffs and the grays. So at least they were headed in the right direction. I haven't seen them in probably 2 years or so, so I don't really know where they're at compared to where they were a couple of years ago. But I mean, I'll give that to the Sebastopol people at least. They're trying.
Hey Nate, guess what?
What?
You've done it. You've done it.
Broke Monteith's record.
You broke the Monteith record.
Really? Oh.
1 hour and 48 minutes. You are on 156. You have broke the record.
Yeah, we covered a lot of good things.
What? Yeah.
You know what's great about it? It's like the Olympics, brother. USA, not Canada. USA.
We covered a lot of good topics.
Funny. I know this is public for everybody, but the funny thing is, that for what people don't know about Paul, he's the guy I call when I'm driving somewhere at night at 10 o'clock.
Oh, no. I know. Yeah, because he's up at the same time. You're driving at 11 and he's up because I don't know when the hell he sleeps. I honestly don't.
He's retired. He can just take a nap whenever he wants.
Yeah, but he's constantly somewhere doing something. So, yeah, he's an enigma, my man Paul. But, yeah, he's a good dude. But you did beat his record, so I'm pretty impressed.
I'm glad though. I'm glad we went over some of this stuff.
Yep.
I mean,
good stuff.
Yeah,
that's good stuff. Needed to be done.
It's I do think, and everybody might not entirely agree with some of the things I said, and that's okay. But that's from my observations. It's from people I've talked to. I have talked to and been mentored by some people that were considered some of the best waterfowl people or waterfowl judges. Again, I guess that's subject to your opinion. But that's what I've done. It's what I've seen. I've been actually breeding geese for a while. So I guess what I stand by. But
it's all right, man.
If anybody wants for something, I'm going to throw this out here real quick so I can keep beating Paul's record, I guess. But I am the president of the International Waterfowl Breeders Association. If anybody is interested in joining, please feel free to contact me, reach out. We have a Facebook group. I'm on Facebook. Obviously, I have you can find my name and my email address, phone number on websites, on the ABA judges list, or on the IWBA website. It is on there as well. So I think we're doing a lot of good things. We're moving the association in the right direction. We've grown a lot of membership in both the United States and Canada. If you're a person that's a member and you haven't received a newsletter, please reach out. We know our mailing system is great. Apart from that, we're a really great group. We're a really great organization of people, I think, and we're trying to do the best thing for waterfowl. We're trying to grow it and we're trying to promote it and do the best we can. You see a lot of waterfowl winning at shows in these last couple of years. I think they've taken a really big leap and a really great step. So,
but a lot of them. There's a lot more. Yeah, there's a lot more waterfowl shown. Kind of reminds me back in the old days, Matt, when we were 20 years old, and and 21 and 19 at the Great Lakes Show. It was amazing.
Mhm.
The number of waterfall, even if you're not a waterfall person per se, I mean, just walking through it and looking at them, it's a great thing. It really is.
Mhm.
Well, I'm glad you came on.
Yeah,
Yes.
thanks. Appreciate it. It was a good time.
We got to plug
Always
our
a good time.
sponsors.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Do it, Matt.
But
Tell 'em.
don't forget them. Rozier's Poultry Supply. All your poultry supply needs, and now pigeon supplies. And then Mike's there, Eagle Nest Hatchery. Dustin and Mike are over there working. And how many eggs you set today?
8,000 so far.
Can you imagine?
I've listen. I got to get back out there. We got another. I think 2,500 to 3,000's got to be done tonight. I think
Good thing
Terry's
you're
out there
retired.
setting them right now.
Yeah,
Huh?
good thing he's retired.
Yeah.
Good thing you're
Yeah,
retired, Mike.
I'm
He's short.
retired, all right.
He's short to the ground, so he can pick them up easier too. So
Yeah, I've got a picker upper. When I'm out in the pens, no, I just pick them up. I use those Tom things. Nah, I ain't bending over that. Too many pens, too many eggs.
and
Well,
the
it'd be a
last
shame
one.
if
I
you
don't
all
go
were
in.
good.
And Hatching Time is our affiliate. Keep ordering your stuff. Hey, Good Goose and Duck Incubators too, boys and girls.
We've got several people using them for that. And if you got a question about a product, feel free to email us. I'll help you with what I can. I don't like everything they make, so as unopposed to some of the Facebook comments I seen last week, no, we're not plugging everything, but we do like the incubators. So there's that.
And the Hatcher, which
The
is
hatchery,
basically the
that's
same
it.
thing.
Mine's
And
kicking
the
around.
Waterers. It's like anything. You're not going to like everything. And listen, nobody's going to like. I read one today on there. He was looking for an incubator because it said this Hatching Time's junk. Okay. I almost commented. I didn't comment. I pat myself on the back from that. Uh, if that's what you think, that's what you think. It's
Always,
okay.
and this goes for all of them over the years. They're only good as the person running it. And if you don't understand how they work, you're probably not going to have any success with any of them.
And it isn't saying that even if you do know, you might get a lemon. It happens. That doesn't mean they're all bad. It doesn't mean if one out of 250 you're having trouble and the other 249 aren't. You might want to understand maybe it's either you or you just got unlucky.
And the
But
customer
if you
service,
think,
customer
yes, if you
service,
think they're junk, you're having trouble with yours, call them, ask them, have them step you through that instead of just getting pissy and getting on Facebook.
yep,
How about trying to get an answer to help people?
yep. They do.
That's more.
I've been there. I've repaired a bunch of them and called, and customer service is very good. If you're tech savvy, you'll get on a little same time chat, and they'll actually walk you right through most of the problems. And I probably have the oldest ones that were sold, so I've had them over 5 years. So got quite a bit of experience with them. Turn them off and on every year, and all the little problems that they have. Every one of them has problem, folks. Go back to humid airs and how many humid airs and redwoods have we fixed, along with even
Hundreds.
the GQFs that had their issues over the years, and they've updated them and whatever. That's a good incubator as well. You got to get with what you like and what I always tell everybody. Your hatch, and I told Mike this last week, even at the hatchery, your hatch percentage of fertile eggs going into the hatcher is the telltale. If you're having trouble with hatching fertile eggs when they go into the hatcher, then you got issues, whether it's incubation issues, husbandry issues, process issues. But that hatching percentage of eggs going into the hatcher should be in the 90s. If it's not, you've got some things you need to improve. So I'll stand by that. And I did it here. I went from 50% to in the high 90s with these incubators. So
What did I tell you my hatch rate was? I did that small hatch. 98%. That ain't bad. 98% of what was fertile hatched. That was, I did AI 4 of the eggs, and all 4 of them were hatched. and that was the big black cochins, a dozen of them, and haven't even trimmed them yet. Just wanted to see what was happening. I found out what was happening. They're getting to the children's home. Everything's okay.
Yep.
So,
And the good thing is you don't have to hatch near as many. I don't have to hatch half as many as what I used to. So
yep, set happens, but yeah, you have to set. Yeah, exactly. I know what you mean.
What they do is they'll run you out of brooder space pretty quick.
Yes, they will. Yes, they will. Again, Nate, thanks for coming on.
Yes, thank you.
Learned a lot. Now, whether it sticks with me, you know me, Nate. We've known each other a long time. It may stick. I may have a revelation in the middle of it all and go, oh, I know what I'm doing.
That's the
So,
question I had, and I'm going to answer it right here. So on Spotify and YouTube, you can go back and get the chronological list of all 54 episodes. And if you want
yes.
to, I had to refer somebody back to the Call Duck episode the other day, and Facebook makes it very difficult for us to keep more than the last couple in front of you. They're in there, but
Yes.
God knows how far they're buried down. But if you go to Spotify or YouTube, you can
Or
go
YouTube.
right in order. They're all right there. And on Spotify, I tend to just keep the podcasts on there so that you can find them easy and not cluttered up with a lot of other stuff. So Spotify, especially if you want to find a one that you missed or go back and listen to them again, they're there. Coming up the 20th of the month will be 1 year of doing this wonderful thing. So we got an anniversary.
And wait a minute and tell them what we're going to have on the 19th.
On the 19th, Nathan Pullen, that has the Poultry Hub software that was used at the Congress, is coming on. He's going to do a live demo with you. First, we're going to do it in two parts because it's got quite a bit to cover. And we're trying to figure out how to get some screenshots up here so you can look at it. But the first episode, we're going to demo the show secretary into the program, how to set it up, what to do. And then the second episode, he's actually going to let you go in there and do some clerking, look up some things and some other features he's got on the program ready to go. So look more from that. You'll see it on our website it's on our website, our Facebook page at M&M Poultry and Exhibition Poultry, and then on the Poultry Hub as well. We'll give a little preliminary announcements when we're going to do it, but we got 2 dates locked down, and we'll get that up here when we get it all nailed down.
Clip that. Go ahead.
If you haven't seen that program or you heard us talking about it or you've seen Ethan's couple podcasts we've done already, I think it's going to kind of revolutionize some of these show secretaries' work, and I really like the way it does. I know what he does on the Poultry Hub now have all the winners from the Congress. You can go in there by breed and pull it up. Now, don't have the exhibitors list on there, but you can go back and see, how many birds and what won what. I noticed when we were doing it, when we were watching it, when they were live, I had one screen up with the exhibitors list and one screen up with the placings as they were coming in, so I could look back and forth. I think down the road he's going to have those as a historical thing. So if you do your show on Poultry Hub, your final list will be up there and the winners will be there. So kind of a neat little thing to look up and see how everybody did. And we've got several shows lined up for the spring, and one of the reasons why he wanted to do this with us was the amount of show secretaries that contacted him with questions. So hoping to knock them questions out with a couple podcasts.
Yep. Oh, and if you're watching this on Facebook, if you watch us there, and you also go to YouTube, this won't be on YouTube for hopefully by tomorrow evening. Like I say, forgot the computer, so I'm using a notepad, and I'm not going to download on that notepad because Nate went 2 hours and 8 minutes and 28 seconds, and I don't have that much room. I got to go home. We could have won. We just could have kept going. So listen, get it together, and we'll do one of these on ducks.
All right.
Sounds good.
You could have a couple other people in on that one too.
We got to get
we can get up.
That's one of our plans to talk about some Welsh Harlequins, and he's on my list.
Mm-hmm.
He's on my list too. I don't know if it's about Welsh Harlequins. No, I like Jake.
All right,
all right, gentlemen. It's been fun. You know what? I got to go out and set eggs, man.
Get busy.
Bye.